She was a beautiful Caribbean immigrant, fighting for a better life for her son.
She was a giving, loving mother who obviously sacrificed everything for this boy.
He was the man who could make her dreams come true.
He was so nice, so caring, enjoyed being around her son, and wanted to build a life and a future with her.
Their perfect union seemed destined to last forever. Until an ungodly crime turned their home into a house of horrors.
This scene is gruesome. There's blood everywhere, and there's a Bible verse pinned on the chest of the victim.
I still remember the verse, "It is that which is crooked cannot be made straight."
Seems like something out of a Stephen King novel.
But this twisted tale is no work of fiction. In fact, what lies beneath is almost too impossible to believe.
Maybe there's something he was trying to push down and then he just couldn't push it down anymore.
For me, it was like survival mode. Like, what do I do next?
It isn't all butterfly and cupcakes out there in the world. There's some cruel people out there.
May 31st, 2010. It's a mild spring afternoon in the multicultural metropolis of Toronto, Canada. But while many people in town are enjoying the nice day, Sharon Charles is growing increasingly concerned. She's been unable to reach her 28-year-old sister, Lucida, all day.
It was unusual for Lucida not to answer her phone, so her sister goes to her apartment, knocks on the door, but no one answers.
Lucida! She thinks, well, maybe Lucida's out running errands or something.
But Sharon knows Lucida will be home soon to greet her 7-year-old special needs son, Mateo, when he arrives from school.
He suffered from cerebral palsy. He couldn't walk, he couldn't speak, he couldn't feed himself. He needed constant care, and she was the one that was there for him.
But when Mateo's bus arrives just past 3 o'clock, his mother is nowhere to be found.
Mateo wasn't picked up, and her sister and some of Lucida's friends were worried about her because they knew how devoted she was to this child, and there's no way she would just not show up.
She was not responding to any phone calls, which is very unlike her. She would have returned the call right away, even if she weren't able to answer when you called. Sharon decided to get the superintendent to let her in the apartment because the situation just didn't feel right.
When the superintendent opens the door to Lucida's apartment, Sharon's fears intensify.
Wait a minute. Those are her keys. Right there.
Ma'am, you wait right here. I'm gonna go check it out.
Sharon saw keys on the table, which says, in her mind, her sister is there, but she's not responding. She's not, she didn't come to the door, she didn't answer the phone. So something has to be wrong, something bad has to have happened.
So the superintendent goes into the apartment, and when he comes out, he doesn't say a word to Sharon. He immediately calls 911.
Within minutes, first responders are on the scene. As they enter Lucida's bedroom, they walk into a nightmare.
She's laying on the bedroom floor. She has a comforter pulled up that basically covers her entire body. There is a massive amount of blood and blood spatter in the room. She's obviously deceased.
Even a hardened investigator walking into that room would have been sick to his stomach.
But this is only a prelude to the horrors to come. Before it's over, investigators will have to unravel a case rooted in misguided faith and obsession, where the most chilling secrets are indeed washed in blood.
Stabbing Bible pages on somebody's chest, and specifically those statements, is a bold way to send a message.
Born in 1982 in the Caribbean nation of St. Lucia, Lucida was as beautiful and warm as her island home from a young age.
She grew up in a close-knit family with an older sister and 3 older brothers, and everybody loved Lucida.
She lit up her room. She had just a warm quality that draws people in.
You have a bright young woman who was capable of doing anything she wanted in life. There was talk of her actually wanting to be a teacher.
After high school, Lucida felt like the world was at her fingertips, until an unexpected event in 2002 changed her life forever.
She got pregnant with her boyfriend and decided to keep the baby.
Not long after the birth of her son, Mateo, Lucida's doctors made a devastating diagnosis.
Her son Mateo was diagnosed with a severe form of cerebral palsy. It was too much for his father to bear, so he soon rejected his son.
Mateo's father wanted nothing to do with him and basically walked away from the relationship.
Meanwhile, Lucida's resolve to be a good mother only seemed to grow stronger every day.
A lot of people, they go into despair, they give up. From what I understood from her friends, that was not the case with her. She loved this little boy.
She was obviously a mother who had a strong will to do the best for her child. He was a sick little boy, and she wanted him to thrive.
But raising a special needs child in St. Lucia was an uphill battle.
Home care for a severely disabled child such as Mateo Charles would be overwhelmingly expensive for someone in St. Lucia.
There wouldn't be a lot of opportunities for government funding. You know, you'd be basically doing it on your own.
To fulfill her dream of giving Mateo a better life, Lucida looked across the ocean to Canada.
Canada does have a better healthcare system. Someone with that physical condition will have more opportunities to get cared for.
Canada was a place that could give him a better life, so she sacrificed everything for him, leaving behind her family in St. Lucia, coming here for a better life.
So in 2004, Lucida said goodbye to her native home and followed her older sister Sharon to Toronto. But starting a life in a new country with a severely disabled child was often lonely.
She would basically be working to take care of her son. She probably wouldn't have much of a personal life. Knowing that her son is her life, that would have been the driving force behind her going out and doing whatever she had to do to survive and make sure her son was taken care of.
After spending her days caring for her son, Lucida yearned for someone to care for her.
She was looking for someone to help support her son and her, someone that she could depend on and grow a second life with. Everything she did, I believe she did for her son's well-being.
For Lucida, that prayer seemed to come true one day at church in 2008 when she locked eyes with a handsome fellow parishioner.
Hey, I don't believe we met before.
Hi, I'm Lucida.
Hi, I'm Patrick Barrett. Who you got here?
Patrick was 37 years old and a divorcee. He was about 11 years older than Lucida. He had moved from Jamaica to Toronto when he was 8 or 9 years old, so they immediately had something in common. And Lucida felt like he was easy on the eyes.
Didn't have a record. He was active in the church. He had a trade. He had a good job. Didn't have a substance problem. He worked in a home renovation center, and he was very skilled with tools.
His strong faith also immediately impressed Lucida.
That goes a long way within the Caribbean community. I would say 99% of us are religious.
They started spending more time at church. One thing led to another, and they eventually started dating.
So, how do I look?
You look good, girl. Come here, let me take a closer look.
For the first time in years, it seemed Lucida finally had a shot at passion and romance in her life.
Her boyfriend, he was there caring for her. They were in an intimate relationship. He showed a level of interest in her that made her feel comfortable with herself.
This was the real thing.
But while their passion knew no bounds, what really won Lucida's heart was Patrick's love for her son.
He was a loving caregiver to Mateo. He treated Mateo like he was his own son.
As they grew closer, the couple decided to take their relationship to the next level.
They rented an apartment in Toronto, and they looked like a ready-made family.
Baby, I love you so much. You know that, right? Will you marry me?
Yes!
You will?
Yes!
He wanted to marry her. He wanted to have a future with her, wanted to have more children.
With a perfect fiancé, a father for her child, and the promise of a new life, it looked like the immigrant dream was coming true for Lucida Charles. Of course, she had no way of knowing that in a few short months, that dream and her life would lay in ruination.
This wasn't the fairy tale ending that everyone was hoping for.
For her to be taken so tragically, I know it struck a lot of people.
But who could have wanted to kill this vibrant young mother? As police step into her world, they won't believe the secrets that are about to pour forth.
The reaction was, people are going to be horrified by this. It really shook me to the bone.
When 22-year-old Lucida Charles moved to Toronto to give her disabled son a better life, she never expected she'd also meet her knight in shining armor.
Patrick Barrett was a loving, attentive partner to Lucida Charles. He paid great attention and cared well for Mateo Charles.
But their tender romance was ripped apart on May 31st, 2010, when Lucida's blood-soaked body was discovered inside her home.
They find Lucida. She's obviously deceased. She's laying on the bedroom floor. She has a comforter pulled up that basically covers her entire body. There is a massive amount of blood and blood spatter in the room.
At the scene, officers try to comfort Lucida's grief-stricken sister, Sharon.
The worst has happened. And I'm sure that knowing that her sister was so important to Mateo and knowing that something's happened to her sister, that was what made it so horrible, was this child left behind who needed his mother, whose mother would have done anything for him. And now she's gone, and we didn't even know if he understood what had happened to his mother.
She was his angel.
Meanwhile, a team of detectives begins examining the crime scene. As they pull back the blood-soaked comforter covering Lucida's body, investigators make a chilling discovery.
She had a number of Bible pages ripped out of the Bible and pinned to her chest with a butcher knife.
On the first page, there is an underlined passage from the book of Ecclesiastes.
I still remember the verse. It is that which is crooked cannot be made straight, was the quote that stuck with me.
The second page contains an even more ominous quote.
Some of the lines that we took and stabbed to her chest. There's a passage in Ecclesiastes, a time to heal, a time to kill. It's a very famous passage.
It sounds like something that's out of a horror movie, to be honest. The insanity that it takes to do something like that would need a lot of creativity, to be honest, and a lot of emotion behind it too, and very, very symbolic meaning.
But detectives soon discover it's not the knife in Lucida's chest that killed her.
Her orbital bone was broken, but she also had 21 catastrophic injuries to her head and skull. The one side of her, I believe the left side of her skull, was completely caved in, and in fact, her actual brain is exposed to the open air from the level of violence.
At Lucida's bedside, investigators spot what looks like the murder weapon.
The weapon of choice was a rather large hammer that had been left laying on Lucida's body.
Well, you know, how horrific the murder was for any individual to use a weapon like that and continuously smash someone's skull in. That person is basically insane. They're no longer normal. Like their mindset is just insanity. Like they've lost complete control.
I think it's probably one of the most gruesome murders I've heard of in a very long time. It's a horrible way to die.
For detectives, the bizarre and savage nature of the crime makes it difficult to pinpoint an exact motive.
It could have been a break and enter that had gone wrong. It could have been a robbery. It could have been a multitude of things. We're always open to any avenues that present themselves.
When you have a crime like this, sometimes it's a stranger and stranger attack. So it's a process of elimination for detectives. She was an attractive young lady. Maybe somebody had seen her and gone after her.
The level of violence always turns your mind to a mental health issue.
Was there something in her background that led to this, either from back home in St. Lucia or in Toronto?
I can tell you that it's certainly on the initial hours of any homicide. Everything is possible.
But one clue helps investigators focus their line of inquiry on a smaller pool of suspects.
Crime scene was locked.
The door being locked certainly turns our mind to whether or not the person had a key.
Ms. Charles, other than the superintendent, who else has keys to your sister's apartment?
Lucida's fiance, Patrick Barrett.
Patrick Barrett, okay. Was he ever violent towards her?
No, sir.
Never?
No.
For detectives, it's crucial that they talk to Lucida's fiance as soon as possible.
Well, certainly in any death of a female, we always look immediately to spouse or spouse equivalent.
It typically does work out like that most of the time.
While investigators know there's a chance that Patrick could be involved in this crime, there's also another possibility.
He could have also been a victim. If this attacker that did this to her, who knows what could have happened to him? You know, investigators weren't sure. They had to keep an open mind, but they also needed to find him and speak to him to try to put this thing together.
Maybe it was someone that Patrick or Lucida knew. Maybe she felt comfortable allowing this person into their home. After the murder, the person locked the door and left.
Detectives dispatch officers to the hardware store where Patrick Barrett works. Meanwhile, Sharon Charles tells investigators something that makes Lucida's death seem even more tragic.
Lucida Charles believed that she was pregnant.
What Lucida's sister reveals next will blow this investigation wide open, leaving some to wonder if the road to murder was paved by temptation.
I was shaking my head for months about it, and it really stuck with me.
On May 31st, 2010, Lucida Charles, the loving mother of a boy with severe cerebral palsy, was found dead, the victim of a grisly murder with bizarre religious overtones.
Lucida Charles' skull was fractured by multiple blows by an industrial hammerhead. It left gaping holes in her skull. The cascade of blows in multitude left her brain scattered on the floor, and then the killer embeds 2 pages in the Bible with a butcher's knife into her sternum.
Now police want to track down Lucida's fiancé, Patrick Barrett, for questioning. They've just learned a surprising and sad revelation about their victim.
Lucida's sister, Sharon, told detectives that Lucida thought she was pregnant.
But Sharon isn't quite finished. What she says next leaves investigators floored.
She was not sure that it was Patrick's.
Did Patrick know about it? I don't think so.
According to Sharon, for the past few months, her younger sister had been secretly seeing another man named J.R. Daniels.
Lucida had met him at church, not unlike where she had met Mr. Barrett.
He's a married man with 2 children, a self-employed contractor. He would help Lucida, give her lifts places. And as Lucy's sister, Sharon, called him, he was a godsend to her because he was such a refreshingly different character than Patrick Barrett. And I think she was deeply in love with him. I mean, fortunately, he was a married man. This is an affair on the side. So I'm not sure it had any real future.
A married man could easily have a motive for murder if he was worried about the consequences of cheating.
Investigators waste no time tracking JR down and asking him to come in for an interview.
He was really upset.
But is JR more upset about Lucida's death or about the fact that police are now questioning him?
So the police started to look at JR as well as they started to piece together the different relationships.
When JR spoke to the police, the first thing he said was, I'll just tell you right front that I was having an affair with Lucida. It was a physical relationship.
I definitely don't think Lucida had any seriousness when it came to her relationship with JR. It was more of a, we'll just have fun for now type of thing, and we'll forget about it tomorrow.
Were you aware that Lucida was possibly pregnant?
Yes.
And that wasn't a problem for you?
It was, but not a problem to where I'll kill her.
Can you tell us where you might have been on May 31st?
May 31st, I was home with my wife.
When investigators speak with JR's wife, she corroborates her husband's story. But they still aren't 100% convinced.
They looked at his arms. There were no signs that he was involved in any kind of struggle.
His story seemed to check out, so detectives let him go.
JR's existence raises troubling issues. Why did Lucida choose to cheat on Patrick with him? Was it just a fling, or was it indicative of bigger problems in her relationship?
They definitely had some questions for Patrick.
However, there's a problem. Investigators still can't seem to find him anywhere.
We checked his place of work. He was supposed to be at work that day. He had not shown up for his shift.
Investigators decided to initiate a nationwide search for Patrick.
I'm putting it all over the airwaves. Other reporters in this town are doing the same. There's a manhunt on for this person at this point.
Certainly in our newsroom, it was a story that was played up. So when a child is involved, a special needs child, and his mother is murdered, this is a story that people are going to listen to. People watch for stories that affect them.
And it doesn't take long for detectives to get a tip from a man hours away in Eastern Ontario named Peter Olson. Detectives ask him to answer some questions at the station. He tells police that he and his wife were with Patrick Barrett that very afternoon.
They had just seen him.
And apparently, Patrick wasn't alone.
He has this other woman with him.
The woman was Peter's daughter, Michelle Olson.
But what was Michelle doing with Patrick less than 24 hours after Lucida's death? And where are the two headed now? The answers to these questions are about to open a new chapter in this already tragic case. Less than 24 hours after Lucida Charles' brutal killing, detectives in Toronto, Canada have begun an intense nationwide manhunt for her missing fiancé, Patrick Barrett.
Lucida is dead and Patrick is nowhere to be found. So the question is, where is he? And did he have anything to do with her death?
A mystery that only seems to deepen when police receive a phone call on June 1st, 2010, from the father of a 24-year-old Toronto resident named Michelle Olson.
I spoke to Michelle's dad, and he told me that Michelle and Patrick had showed up unannounced at his home. They were on their way to Montreal.
According to Peter Olson, not long after Michelle and Patrick left his Ontario home for Montreal, he turned on the television.
They realize he's a wanted man. His daughter has just gone away on a road trip with a wanted killer. This could be your parents' worst nightmare. Your daughter's having a relationship with a guy who's just bludgeoned his previous lover to death.
Contact the Toronto Police Department with any information.
When Detective Gray tries to clarify how Michelle and Patrick know each other, Peter makes a stunning revelation.
Michelle and Patrick weren't just friends.
His relationship with Lucida was kind of falling apart, and that emotion actually drove him to want somebody, and at the time he had Michelle.
According to Michelle's father, the two met at the hardware store where they both worked in 2009.
Hey! Hey, what's up?
Michelle at the time was a coworker of Patrick's. She was working the cash register.
Everything going all right at work today?
Yeah, I'm just on break now, but ready to get off.
And though there was a 13-year age gap between his daughter and Patrick, it seems the two quickly found common ground.
They had similar religious beliefs.
Michelle admired that Patrick took his religion really seriously.
Peter says it wasn't long before Michelle introduced her parents to the special new man in her life.
She's ecstatic that a good Christian boy is interested in her, and they share these Christian values. She's very interested in him as a partner.
For investigators, news of Patrick and Michelle's close relationship is reason enough to put a new suspect on their radar.
It's an assumption that has to be explored, whether Michelle is involved.
Both she and Patrick were very religious people, and they had started seeing each other. And Bible verses were found pinned on Lucida's body. It kind of makes you wonder.
While they were at your house, did you notice them acting strangely anyway?
Well, not out of Michelle. She seemed pretty much the same. Patrick seemed a little bit moody, a little bit off.
Michelle's parents seemed to feel like he was acting oddly, maybe not suspicious, but jumpy, unusual. Michelle's parents spoke to her about his behavior, but she didn't seem to understand what might be making him act this way.
After wrapping up their interview with Peter, Detective Gray and her team throw all available resources into their manhunt.
We began looking for them by looking through their cell phones. We had a last known address where Michelle's phone had hit a tower, and we knew that they were in Montreal, so their major crime unit there was looking for them. We were doing our due diligence here by trying to contact credit card companies, that sort of thing, banking information, to see if we could use exigent circumstances to identify where Michelle's identification was being used.
While the search intensifies, Detective Gray tries to learn more about her two potential chief suspects. Police begin by speaking to Lucida's friends and family, and the picture that emerges about Patrick is hardly flattering.
He was sweet to her in public, in front of her friends. But Lucida had divulged to a couple of other friends that, in fact, behind closed doors, he was anything but sweet.
He didn't want her to go out with her friends. He wanted her home all the time for him.
Patrick treated her as a possession. He wanted to go everywhere that she went. Very seldom was Lucida allowed or encouraged to do anything on her own. And quite frankly, I think he actually thrived on the fact that when he wasn't there, Lucida was bound to the house by Mateo.
As Lucida developed a more stable support group in Toronto, she got to the point where she told herself, I don't want to do this anymore, and I don't want to be treated like this.
It seemed like she wanted to end the relationship.
And that explains why she started to have an affair with JR.
But it's when detectives conduct a formal interview with Lucida's sister Sharon that they discover something else unexpected about the mother-to-be's future plans.
She had no way wanted to have another child.
She was pregnant, but I know she wanted an abortion. She didn't want to really risk having another child like Mateo.
And apparently, that wasn't the only time Lucida had gone that route with Patrick Barrett.
She had one previous abortion. She insisted that because of the demands of having a child like Mateo, that she couldn't have another child.
Sharon says that as a religious man, Patrick strongly disapproved of abortion.
Well, obviously, I mean, from a religious standpoint, that would have been against his religious principles.
But Patrick's opposition went far beyond a traditional pro-life stance. Apparently, Patrick's religious fervor began around 2008, after his marriage fell apart.
He was so despondent over it, he was suicidal. He lost his job.
He seen that God was the missing piece to his life, so he decided to devote himself to learning more about his religion.
His devotion got deeper and deeper, so when he met Lucida and her son, Mateo, he felt like God had sent them to him as a chance for redemption. In Patrick's mind, he felt like if he proved himself worthy, God would bless him with a reward.
Patrick believed it was God's gift for him to have a daughter.
Patrick Barrett was obsessed with the idea of having a daughter because he already had 3 sons.
As investigators listen to Sharon's story, they begin to wonder if Patrick had somehow learned of Lucida's plan to abort her baby, and if so, had he exploded in homicidal rage.
Maybe he realized there was something bubbling up in him that he was trying to keep down, and he just couldn't push it down anymore.
It's not just they want to speak to him anymore, they think he's responsible.
If what Sharon Charles says is true, detectives know Michelle could be in grave danger.
I was concerned that Patrick was on the run and that Michelle could have been possibly the next victim. I was calling her phone constantly, trying to get her to pick up.
But before investigators can catch a lead, the case takes a startling turn when the most improbable person confesses.
I didn't have an explanation for what had happened or why. I thought, like, I just wanted this to be over. Like, I don't want to deal with these feelings anymore.
"27-year-old Lucida Charles' savage death on May 31st, 2010 has opened a Pandora's box of secrets about her life and that of her 41-year-old fiancé, Patrick Barrett.
By that spring, it seemed like their relationship was on the brink. They had started seeing other people even while they were still living together.
I think Patrick saw the writing on the wall. He was described as being obsessive, controlling, and deeply religious. So if he somehow found out that Lucida was pregnant, that could be a game changer for him.
He believed that God was going to send him a daughter.
But on the night of June 1st, more than 24 hours after the crime, Patrick Barrett is still missing, and he's with another young female companion. That's when police receive a phone call that changes everything.
Hello?
Hi, I need to speak to the detective working on the Lucida Charles case. My name is Michelle Olson.
Said who I was, where I was, and in regards to why I was calling.
Michelle, at that point, was a little disoriented.
I was just with Patrick Barrett, and we were on our way. He was going to turn himself in. He told me about what happened, and he left. He got out.
Mr. Barrett told Michelle what he had done. She, rightfully so, was quite upset.
While a patrol car is dispatched to pick up Michelle, officers intensify their search for Patrick.
We had a ground search out looking for him.
Back at the station, investigators sit down with Michelle in an interview room.
They were getting me ready to give my statement to the police. One of the first things I asked was, am I in trouble?
As detectives know, that all depends on what Michelle says next. They begin by asking her if she knew that Patrick was involved with Lucida Charles. According to Michelle, that's all Patrick talked about when she met him 1 year earlier at the hardware store where they both worked.
He was very vocal about his relationship. He was in love, they were engaged at the time. He talked about her son, and he was just like really excited to be in that relationship.
It was a situation that Michelle claimed she respected, despite her own feelings for Patrick.
I thought he was a really good-looking guy. He was just a really friendly, gregarious guy around the workplace, and I just kept my distance. I knew he was in a relationship.
But Michelle says in January of 2010, Patrick called her and made a confession.
He told me that he thought the relationship was over between them because she told him that she only became a Christian for him, and that bothered him a lot.
As for Patrick and Lucida's living situation, Michelle says she was told it was a temporary arrangement.
He said it was about financial issues. You know, he was looking to move out, but they had I think it was a 3 or 6 month plan forward that separation. One time I asked him if he thought that she was seeing someone else, and he said that he thought she was. And I asked, how do you feel about that? If that was the case, said he was happy for her.
Michelle claims once Patrick assured her he was a single man, she let go of her heart.
Michelle and Patrick were intensely attracted to each other. It wasn't just a religious connection.
We talked about anything and everything, constantly, searching for answers or for knowledge about various topics.
Certainly in Michelle's mind, and to my mind, it was a very serious relationship to her.
But detectives still don't understand how Michelle ended up on a road trip with Patrick hours after Lucida's death. Michelle explains that it all began with a phone call from Patrick at 5 a.m. on the morning of May 31st.
When he called me that morning, he said, "I'm not going to work today, can I come over?" And I was like, "I'm sleeping, but okay, that's fine, I'd come over."
Just before 6, she says Patrick knocked on her door.
He came with a backpack, had some work clothes in it. It was strange, and he was kind of rigid.
Patrick, hey.
What are you doing here so early?
How about we take a road trip to Montreal today?
Montreal today?
Yes, today.
Well, I can't.
And my response was, well, I have school and work, so I have to think about it. I wasn't sure. So I went back to bed.
Michelle says when she woke up, Patrick made a startling admission to her.
He tells me that he committed the ultimate sin.
I panicked a bit internally, and I went to Google while he was in the washroom and typed in the ultimate sin, because part of me was I didn't know what that could be.
After she Googled the ultimate sin, she found out that it was forsaking God. I think her understanding at the time was, after talking about wanting to get close to God and being this religious man, he just totally neglected the idea of ever wanting to get close to God and everything he stood for.
Though Michelle didn't know why someone like Patrick would turn his back on the Lord, she knew that she couldn't abandon him in a spiritual crisis.
She felt like the need to kind of bring him back down the same road that she's going through, because she's, in a sense, a religious woman, and she felt the need to help him out.
Okay, I'll go to Montreal with you.
Okay, all right.
But I want to stop by my parents first.
Okay.
On the road, Michelle hoped Patrick would open up about what was ailing him. Instead, she said, he shut her out.
It was really challenging for me to be in that car with him, because he wasn't himself at all. He wasn't really speaking a whole lot. So I'm trying to pull things out of him, but he's not really talking.
Later, after they left her parents' house, the tension between them began to build.
Patrick, when are you going to tell me what's going on?
When we get to Montreal, okay?
Since we left Toronto, he had told me that he wanted to have a conversation. There was a conversation, but every time after, okay, we'll talk later.
Once they got to their hotel, Patrick put the conversation off again.
He said, okay, let's turn off our phones. Let's just be you and me.
That night, Michelle says Patrick didn't sleep a wink.
A couple times I'd wake up and he was standing by the door looking out the peephole. So he was very paranoid, very paranoid.
By the following morning, Michelle says she couldn't take Patrick's secrecy any longer, and she confronted him outside a Montreal mall.
I was like, I feel like there's this dark cloud looming. You're about to drop a bomb on me. Hurry up and tell me. It's driving me crazy.
But she says nothing could have prepared her for what Patrick said next.
He was like, I can't go back to Toronto.
Why?
Police are looking for me. People want me dead.
And I was like, okay, why? He was like, Lucida's dead. I killed her. I probably went into shock. For me, it was kind of survival mode. What do I do next?
According to Michelle, she gave Patrick 2 options.
You can come back to Toronto with me and we'll go to the cops together. Or I leave you here and I go to the cops myself.
Fine. Let's just go.
He dragged me into this. I didn't want to get into any kind of trouble with the police, right?
Finally, at 10 o'clock, they made it back to the outskirts of Toronto and turned on the radio.
We heard that they were looking for our car, the rental car. And that's when I knew that my family knew what was going on, because they're the only people that knew we had rented a car. That's the only people. So for me, I was like, I'm done. I'm going to the police.
But faced with the reality of turning himself in, Patrick couldn't do it.
Just let me out right here, okay?
Okay, fine, all right.
He decided he wanted to get out. So I pulled off, ironically, outside a church, right off the 401, and I left him there.
After hearing Michelle's story, detectives feel confident they're talking to an innocent woman.
As soon as Patrick confesses to Michelle what he's done, she immediately tells him, we're going home, we're going to the police. So that's the trademark behavior of someone who's innocent, who's a law-abiding citizen.
She wasn't any kind of an accomplice in any way.
But the ordeal has taken an obvious toll on this innocent young woman.
It was actually really mean to come to me, to come in the morning and knowing what he did, and then come and drag me into it and drag my family into it. I just wish the whole thing never happened.
But the question remains, where is Patrick now? On April 2nd, police receive a call from a man purporting to be Patrick's stepfather.
His father contacted us when he had Patrick on the phone.
He gave investigators Patrick's location and told them he was ready to surrender. So police quickly moved in.
If officers know where you are, they're not taking the chance that you might change your mind.
The odd thing about the reaction of those people after the murder was that it kind of underlined it that he was surrounded by good people. The people around him, they did the right thing and they did it quickly. He was very much alone in what he did.
That evening, Patrick is taken peacefully into custody and charged with Lucida's murder. But even with their suspect now behind bars, the drama is just beginning. In fact, the real story about what happened is about to unfold, and it's one no one will ever forget.
There's a level of evil here that we don't come across every day.
Doesn't seem like something out of the real world.
On May 31st, 2010, Lucida Charles was bludgeoned to death in her own home. A tragedy that left her 7-year-old special needs son orphaned.
It was just sad, and there was no way anyone could look at the little boy's picture or hear about him and not feel horrible.
Now, on September 25th, 2012, 2 years after Lucida's violent murder, the man Canadian authorities say is responsible, her former fiancé, Patrick Barrett, is brought into a Toronto courtroom to stand trial for her murder. In a pre-trial hearing, the judge rules the crime scene photos inadmissible in court.
If you are not showing to the jury, because that's part of what they take into account, the brutality of it, that tells you a lot about just how awful it was and what they found there.
Lucida's family is there to witness the harrowing proceedings.
It was pretty clear from the start there was just real pain going into it. It was like diving into pain.
Lucida's family, they are lovely, really, really nice people. It's a very tough procedure to go through. Going to court every day and following the court, it's a very long, protracted, is tough on families, and they have been resilient the entire time.
In their opening statement, prosecutors paint Patrick Barrett as a religious fanatic. They say he killed Lucida in a homicidal fury over her decision to have an abortion.
He became his own authority on the Bible. So even within his own religion and even within his own teachings, he became controlling and obsessive.
He felt that God had promised him a daughter, so the idea of her abortion was a big deal. It was a really big deal. In any past conversation that we had, if it came up about the topic of abortion, that's when he would get most upset. So it was a very sensitive topic for him.
So much so, prosecutors say, that even after the couple was on the cusp of separating, this revelation upended Patrick's world. They assert it all began on May 31st at 2 a.m., when Lucida returned home from an evening out with friends.
Lucida, while she was undressing, became unwell. She went to the bathroom and she was sick.
What's going on with you today?
I just feel a little sick.
Seems like you've been feeling sick lately, huh?
Yeah.
Patrick suspected that she might be pregnant, so he confronted her about it.
Lucida, I need you to tell me, are you pregnant?
Yes. She believed she was pregnant. She told him. She said, I don't think this is going to work out. I think it's over, and I'm going to abort the baby.
At this point, Lucida got into bed. It was quite late. And she told Mr. Barrett several times that there was no point in arguing, that he was irrational at this point, and that it was best that they both got some sleep and that they would discuss the matter in the morning.
But prosecutors say Patrick didn't go to bed. Instead, he grabbed his Bible and went into another room.
He sat there, he began to read his Bible.
He's had this double-barrel dose of bad news. He's dreaming about having another child. And he believes that this child is a gift from God, that God's rewarding him for being such a good caregiver to Mateo Charles, and that he's brought this beautiful Lucida in his life. Lucida says, I'm not going to have that child, so that dream is over, and our relationship is over.
This enraged Mr. Barrett. He picked up a hammer that had been underneath the sink, and he walked into the bedroom. He immediately struck Lucida about the head and neck.
She stands up, screams, he hits her again. Down she goes, and he bludgeons her head.
There were 11 blows, and probably 2 or 3 would have killed her.
He returned to his Bible, particularly picked 2 pages that he felt most indicative of his thoughts at that moment, and then proceeded to pin those pages from the Bible to her chest.
When it was all over, Patrick cursed God's name, blaming the murder on the Lord's unfulfilled promises.
He was mad at God, that God had failed him, because he felt that he had dedicated his life to God, that somehow he had followed the rules and God had not.
Patrick Barrett's actions are contradictory or hypocritical. If he knew she was pregnant and he kills her, then therefore he's killing 2 human beings at the same time. So it doesn't make any sense.
A death which seems even more senseless after prosecutors present Lucida's autopsy findings.
Lucida, in fact, was not pregnant.
Her life was taken away for no reason.
In the face of the state's overwhelming evidence, Patrick's defense team has few options.
They argued that Lucida's insistence on getting an abortion was so inflammatory that it caused Patrick's violent reaction.
Provocation means you're losing that ability to form the intent to kill, and therefore he's not guilty of murder, he's guilty of manslaughter.
I think the defense was desperate if that was going to be the defense, that she was provoking him by saying, I'm going to have an abortion, despite the fact I know it's against your religious beliefs. That's a desperate move by the defense.
Before the trial is over, the judge strikes down the defense's entire argument.
I don't blame the judge for throwing it out. I mean, a woman has a right to say she wants to have an abortion. She didn't do it to provoke him, I don't think.
It's not a justifiable defense.
After 2 weeks of testimony, on Thursday, October 11th, the jury retires to deliberate Patrick's fate. 5 hours later, they return with a verdict.
They found him guilty of second-degree murder.
Did he have the intent to kill? Absolutely. But did he plan this? Was this a plan that he'd put together and decided that when Lucida comes home, I'm gonna wait till she's in bed? It was a decision to kill on an instant.
Patrick Barrett's sentencing takes place 1 month later. Mateo Charles, the disabled boy who lost his mother, is at the heart of the hearing.
The judge called this crime just savage cruelty. And she said that if anybody would know how important it was for Mateo's mother to be there for him, it would have been Patrick.
A sentiment made abundantly clear by the judgment she hands down.
Patrick was sentenced to life in prison.
But even the harshest punishment could never fit the tragedy of the crime. 2 years after Lucida's death, her son Mateo died in a nursing home.
It's just unbelievably sad.
As for Patrick's own actions, it seems this self-professed man of God ultimately tried to blame everyone but himself.
At no time did he ever take responsibility for his behavior. The man who was going to, wrap his arms around this family and he was going to be their protector, in fact, was a coward. He was pathetic.
She was a very independent, strong woman who had a strong will to do the best for her child. That's what makes it really sad.